The house felt different lately. It wasn't something obvious, but the air had shifted. A strange tension lingered, subtle yet impossible to ignore. I had always believed my mother to be the pillar of warmth and stability in our home, but lately, something about her had changed. She had been smiling at her phone more, her laughter lighter, almost rehearsed. She used to wait eagerly for my father's calls when he was away on business, but now her responses were shorter, distant. The warmth in her voice when she spoke to him had faded, replaced by something mechanical, forced. Then there was the man. He had started coming by when my father was away. At first, I thought he was just a friend, someone she knew from work or the neighborhood. But friends didn't hold each other's gazes like that. Friends didn't touch in passing, fingers lingering just a second too long. And friends certainly didn't meet behind closed doors. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. That I was reading too much into the way she rushed to check her phone when it buzzed, or how she sometimes dressed a little nicer when she thought no one was paying attention. But the signs were there, undeniable and inescapable. Today something felt different. My father had called earlier, his voice carrying excitement. He was supposed to come home tomorrow, but his trip had ended early. "I'll be home in an hour," he had said. My mother had paused, just for a fraction of a second, before responding with a hesitant, "That's great." She hadn't looked excited. She hadn't rushed to make his favorite dinner or fixed her hair the way she always did when he came back. Instead, she had been distracted, checking her phone constantly, her fingers typing messages with urgency. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. Something was wrong. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much I feared it. Soft laugh, hushed voice, the unmistakable rustle of movement. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stood outside the door, the reality of what was happening sinking in. I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right there, just inches away. I pushed the door slightly, just enough to see. My mother was there, her hands tangled in his shirt, his arms wrapped around her. The way she looked at him, it wasn't a mistake, not a lapse in judgment. It was deliberate. It was intimate. It was real. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. This wasn't just some meaningless moment. This was betrayal, raw and undeniable. I wanted to move, to back away, to erase what I had just seen. But my body wouldn't listen. I was stuck, trapped in the nightmare unfolding before me. Then I made a sound. Sharp inhale. A shift of my weight. The wooden floor creaked beneath me. Instantly they froze. My mother turned first, her face draining of color. The man, her lover, followed, his expression shifting from pleasure to pure panic. I felt my hands shaking at my sides, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. She took a step forward. "Wait." I didn't wait. I turned and rushed down the hall, my mind racing. My chest ached from the weight of it all. I wanted to scream, but no words would come. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I fumbled to pull it out, my fingers unsteady. Dad. Just a few minutes away. I stopped cold. Few minutes. That was all the time left before this entire world shattered. The front door opened just as she rushed past me, fixing her hair, straightening her dress, trying to erase the evidence. The man, her lover, moved quickly, heading toward the back exit. But there wasn't enough time. Dad stepped inside, smiling, setting his bag down. "I'm home." His voice was warm, familiar, filled with relief. He had no idea. She met him with a forced smile, a quick embrace, too quick. "You're early," she said, her voice higher than usual. He laughed. "Surprise. I wanted to see you." His eyes softened as he looked at her, the love so clear in them. If he noticed her stiffness, he didn't show it. The air was thick, suffocating. My chest tightened. I wasn't sure if I was breathing. My mother glanced at me, a silent plea in her eyes. "Don't say anything." The weight of it pressed down on me. He deserved to know. He deserved the truth. But I hesitated. Then a sound, too loud in the stillness. The back door clicking shut. Dad turned. His brow furrowed. "Who was that?" Silence. Beep. Too long. His eyes flicked between us, searching for an answer. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My hands were shaking. I clenched them into fists. The truth clawed at my throat, demanding to be spoken. "Mom," I said, my voice hoarse. "What are you doing?" She inhaled sharply, and I saw it, the fear. "Dad!" I swallowed. Someone was here. His face changed. Confusion, then something darker. "What?" His gaze snapped to her. "Who?" She shook her head quickly. "No one." "It's not." Car engine started outside. My father's expression hardened. He stepped past her toward the door. "Wait." Her voice cracked. She reached for his arm, but he pulled away. I had never seen him like this. He opened the door, stepped outside. I followed, my breath shallow. The car was already pulling away, tires screeching against the pavement. Dad stood frozen, staring after it. The realization hit him all at once. His shoulders tensed. His jaw tightened. Slowly he turned back. His eyes met hers. "Who was that?" His voice was quieter now. "Colder." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was unbearable. My father's breathing was slow, controlled, but his hands were clenched at his sides. My mother stood there, frozen, eyes darting between us. She was searching for something to say, some excuse that could undo what had already been done. I could see it in her face, the realization that there was no way out of this. "Tell me the truth." My father's voice was steady, but there was something in it I had never heard before. Not anger. Something worse. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands trembled as she reached for him. "It's not what you think." He flinched away. "Then tell me what it is." She hesitated, and that hesitation was all he needed. He let out a sharp breath and shook his head. His whole body was tense, like he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. I expected him to yell, to demand answers, to lash out. But he didn't. He just looked at her, at the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, and I saw the moment his heart broke. Tears welled in her eyes. Don't, he cut her off. "Just don't." Her shoulders shook, but he had already turned away. He looked at me instead. I didn't know what to say. I had no words that could fix this. His eyes softened for a brief moment. "You did the right thing." "Didn't feel like it." Without another word, he grabbed his bag and walked to the door. My mother let out a choked sob. "Please don't leave. We can." But he didn't stop. The door shut behind him. She sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing but emptiness. I should have felt sorry for her. But I didn't. I turned away, heading to my room, closing the door behind me. Some things, once broken, could never be put back together.